Do you ever think about those Christmas foods from the 1970s that only poor families remember? These dishes filled modest tables with warmth, creativity, and pride, even when money was tight and ingredients were stretched thin. So what made these humble recipes disappear from holiday tables forever? Mock apple pie made with Ritz crackers was one of those clever kitchen tricks that proved love and ingenuity could outweigh any grocery budget. In the 1970s, families who could not afford bushels of fresh apples discovered that buttery crackers soaked in sugar water with cinnamon and lemon juice could taste almost exactly like the real thing. The recipe had been passed down from the Depression era, when grandmothers learned to make miracles from whatever sat in the pantry. Kids never questioned why the filling tasted slightly different, because the flaky crust, warm spices, and sugary syrup created something that felt completely authentic. Parents smiled quietly as children asked for second slices, never revealing the secret that made the pie possible. Neighbors brought these pies to church potlucks, holiday gatherings, and family reunions, and nobody ever guessed the truth. It was a recipe born from necessity, perfected through repetition, and loved because it represented everything Christmas was supposed to be: warmth, generosity, and the quiet triumph of making something wonderful out of almost nothing at all. Canned ham glazed with brown sugar sat at the center of countless Christmas tables in the 1970s, a glistening oval of meat that represented both celebration and compromise. For families who could not afford a massive turkey or a standing rib roast, the canned ham offered something dignified, festive, and undeniably filling. Mothers would slide the ham from its tin, score the surface in careful diamond patterns, and press whole cloves into each intersection before brushing on a glaze made from brown sugar, mustard, and pineapple juice. The oven filled the house with a sweet, smoky aroma that made even the smallest kitchen feel like a gathering. Children watched through the oven window as the glaze bubbled and caramelized, transforming the humble ham into something beautiful. Fathers carved slices with ceremony, and nobody at the table felt like they were missing anything. The leftovers stretched for days, appearing in sandwiches, scrambled eggs, and soup pots that kept the holiday spirit alive. It was never about what you could not afford. It was about making what you had feel like more than enough. Hot dog casserole with Velveeta was the kind of dish that made children cheer and food critics wince, but in the 1970s it represented something far more important than culinary prestige. Families stretched packages of hot dogs into full holiday meals by slicing them into coins, layering them with elbow macaroni, and smothering everything in a blanket of melted Velveeta cheese. The casserole bubbled in the oven until the edges turned golden and crispy, and the smell alone was enough to bring everyone running to the kitchen. Parents loved it because a single dish could feed a crowd without emptying the wallet, and kids loved it because it tasted like comfort wrapped in cheese. Some families added canned tomatoes, others stirred in frozen peas, and a few adventurous cooks topped the whole thing with crushed potato chips for extra crunch. It was never fancy, never pretentious, and never apologized for being exactly what it was. The dish appeared at potlucks, church suppers, and family gatherings where nobody cared about presentation as long as there was enough to go around. In a decade when making ends meet was an art form, hot dog casserole was a masterpiece of practical love. Kool-Aid punch served as the holiday drink in countless homes where real fruit juice or sparkling cider felt like an impossible luxury. In the 1970s, a few packets of powdered drink mix, a cup of sugar, and a pitcher of cold water could transform any gathering into something that felt festive and bright. Mothers mixed the punch in giant bowls, sometimes adding ginger ale for fizz or canned pineapple juice for a tropical twist that made the drink feel fancier than its price tag suggested. Children lined up with paper cups, eyes wide at the brilliant reds, purples, and oranges that seemed to glow under the kitchen lights. The sweetness was intense, the colors were impossible, and nobody cared that it came from a packet instead of a fruit tree. Some families froze the punch into ice rings studded with maraschino cherries, creating centerpieces that floated in the bowl like edible decorations. Others served it warm, spiked with cinnamon sticks and cloves, pretending it was something closer to mulled cider. The drink was never about authenticity. It was about celebration, about making a holiday feel complete even when the budget said otherwise. Jell-O, molds with canned fruit cocktail were the shimmering centerpieces of modest holiday tables, wobbling under the dining room lights like edible jewels suspended in time. In the 1970s, a box of flavored gelatin and a can of mixed fruit could become something that looked almost too beautiful to eat. Mothers poured the hot liquid into ring molds, bundt pans, or fancy copper molds passed down from grandmothers, then carefully arranged the fruit so each slice would reveal a perfect pattern of peaches, pears, cherries, and grapes. The refrigerator worked overnight to set the magic, and by Christmas morning the mold was ready for its grand unmolding onto a bed of iceberg lettuce. Children gasped when it held its shape, and everyone pretended not to notice when it did not. Some families stirred in mini marshmallows, others folded in Cool Whip for a creamier texture, and a few adventurous cooks added shredded carrots or cottage cheese because the 1970s had very flexible ideas about what belonged in a salad. The Jell-O mold was never about taste alone. It was about presentation, about proving that even a simple dessert could make a table look like it belonged in a magazine. Peanut butter fudge without chocolate was the sweet solution for families who loved homemade candy but could not afford the cocoa powder that fancier recipes demanded. In the 1970s, a jar of peanut butter, a bag of powdered sugar, and a stick of butter could become a platter of creamy, rich squares that tasted like something far more expensive. Mothers mixed the ingredients by hand, pressing the thick dough into pans lined with wax paper and cutting perfect pieces once everything had set. The flavor was intense, nutty, and sweet, the kind of treat that stuck to the roof of your mouth and made you reach for a glass of milk. Children helped roll the fudge into balls, press fork patterns into the tops, or sprinkle crushed peanuts over the surface for extra crunch. The recipe required no stove, no candy thermometer, and no special skills, which made it perfect for kitchens where time and money were always stretched thin. Neighbors received these squares wrapped in cellophane and tied with curling ribbon, never guessing that the gift cost almost nothing to make. Peanut butter fudge was proof that holiday sweetness did not require expensive ingredients, just creativity, patience, and love. Bread pudding made from stale loaves was the thrifty dessert that turned yesterday's leftovers into something warm, custardy, and surprisingly elegant. In the 1970s, no family with tight finances ever threw away bread that had gone slightly hard because every slice could be reborn in a baking dish filled with eggs, milk, sugar, and a generous pour of vanilla. Mothers tore the bread into rough chunks, soaked them in the custard mixture, and baked everything until the top turned golden and the edges crisped into caramelized perfection. The kitchen filled with a fragrance that smelled like holidays, comfort, and home all at once. Some families stirred in raisins, others added cinnamon and nutmeg, and a few drizzled warm vanilla sauce over each serving to make the dish feel even more special. Children scraped their bowls clean, unaware that the dessert had started as something most people would have discarded. Bread pudding carried no shame in its origins, only pride in its transformation. It was a dish that honored the past while celebrating the present, a reminder that nothing should ever be wasted when love and heat could turn the ordinary into something extraordinary. Ambrosia salad with Cool Whip appeared at holiday gatherings as the fluffy pastel cloud that everyone recognized but nobody could quite define. In the 1970s, this dish required little more than a tub of whipped topping, a can of mandarin oranges, a can of crushed pineapple, a bag of mini marshmallows, and a generous handful of sweetened coconut flakes. Mothers folded everything together in large mixing bowls, creating a dessert that looked like something between a fruit salad and a dream. Children loved the sweetness, the colors, and the way the marshmallows softened overnight into pillowy bites that melted on the tongue. Some families added maraschino cherries for extra brightness. Others stirred in chopped pecans for crunch, and a few mixed in sour cream to balance the sugar. The dish required no cooking, no baking, and almost no skill, which made it perfect for busy kitchens where time was as precious as money. Ambrosia appeared at church potlucks, family reunions, and holiday buffets, always vanishing faster than anyone expected. It was never fancy, never complicated, and never apologized for being exactly what it was: pure, simple, affordable joy. SOS, which stood for creamed chipped beef on toast, was a military recipe that found its way into civilian kitchens where stretching a few ounces of meat into a full meal was a necessary survival skill. In the 1970s, families opened small jars of dried beef, shredded the salty slices, and stirred them into a thick white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk. The creamy mixture was spooned over slices of toasted bread, creating a dish that was filling, savory, and unmistakably comforting. Fathers who had served in the armed forces recognized the recipe immediately, often joking about the less polite names soldiers had given it during their service. Children ate it without complaint because the sauce was rich, the toast was crispy, and the whole thing tasted like breakfast, and dinner had somehow merged into one satisfying plate. Some mothers added peas for color, others cracked a poached egg on top, and a few served it over biscuits instead of toast. The dish was never glamorous, but it represented something important: the ability to feed a family well even when the pantry held almost nothing. Rice Krispy treats served as holiday cookies in homes where the baking budget could not stretch to cover flour, eggs, and decorations that fancier recipes required. In the 1970s, a box of puffed rice cereal, a bag of marshmallows, and a few tablespoons of margarine could become an entire tray of sweet, crunchy squares that children devoured faster than any decorated sugar cookie. Mothers melted the marshmallows in large pots, stirred in the cereal until every piece was coated, and pressed the sticky mixture into greased pans while it was still warm. The treats required no oven, no rising time, and almost no cleanup, which made them perfect for overwhelmed holiday kitchens. Some families pressed red and green sprinkles into the surface, others drizzled melted chocolate over the top, and a few cut them into Christmas tree shapes using cookie cutters. The treats appeared on cookie platters beside more elaborate confections, and nobody treated them as lesser. They were proof that celebration did not require expense, just creativity and the willingness to make something sweet from whatever was already in the cupboard. Instant mashed potato flakes appeared at countless modest Christmas dinners in the 1970s, offering a shortcut that busy mothers embraced without shame or apology. The box promised fluffy, creamy potatoes in minutes, and for families who could not afford the time or the pounds of fresh potatoes that fancier recipes demanded, the promise felt like a small miracle. Mothers boiled water, stirred in the flakes, added a pat of margarine and a splash of milk, and watched the powder transform into something that looked remarkably close to the real thing. Children never complained because the texture was smooth, the flavor was mild, and the mashed potatoes arrived on their plates still steaming alongside whatever main dish the family could afford. Some mothers added garlic powder, others stirred in shredded cheese, and a few topped the mound with a pool of gravy that hid any hint of the shortcut beneath. The flakes saved hours of peeling, boiling, and mashing, which meant more time for decorating, wrapping, and simply being together. Nobody at the table ever asked whether the potatoes were real, because in that moment they tasted like home, and that was all that mattered. Cornflake candy clusters were the crunchy, sweet treats that appeared on holiday platters when the baking budget ran dry, but the need for something festive remained. In the 1970s, mothers melted butterscotch chips or peanut butter in double boilers, stirred in heaping cups of cornflakes, and dropped spoonfuls onto wax paper to cool into golden mounds. The recipe required almost nothing, just a box of cereal already in the pantry and a bag of chips bought on sale weeks earlier. Children loved the way the clusters shattered slightly when bitten, releasing that familiar cereal crunch mixed with something unexpectedly rich and sweet. Some families added peanuts for extra protein, others drizzled melted chocolate over the tops, and a few pressed red and green sprinkles into the surface before the candy hardened. The clusters looked homemade in the best possible way, imperfect and generous and clearly made with care. Neighbors received them in tins lined with tissue paper, never suspecting how little they cost to create. Cornflake clusters proved that holiday magic did not require expensive ingredients, just a willingness to turn the ordinary into celebration. Boxed macaroni and cheese served as a side dish at Christmas dinners where stretching the budget mattered more than impressing anyone with culinary ambition. In the 1970s, the bright orange noodles appeared beside roasted meats, canned vegetables, and whatever else the family could afford, and nobody treated the dish as anything less than welcome. Mothers boiled the pasta, stirred in the powdered cheese packet with milk and margarine, and spooned the creamy mixture into serving bowls that steamed under the dining room lights. Children reached for seconds before touching anything else on their plates because the flavor was familiar, comforting, and impossible to resist. Some families baked the macaroni with breadcrumb toppings to make it feel fancier. Others stirred in cubed ham or crumbled bacon, and a few added a can of diced tomatoes for color and vitamins. The dish never pretended to be gourmet, and that honesty was part of its charm. It filled plates, satisfied appetites, and stretched tight grocery budgets further than anyone expected. Boxed macaroni and cheese was proof that love could be measured in servings, not in dollars spent at the store. Hamburger stroganoff with egg noodles was the stretchy, savory main dish that turned a single pound of ground beef into enough food to feed an entire family, and sometimes the neighbors too. In the 1970s, mothers browned the meat with onions, stirred in canned mushroom soup and a generous dollop of sour cream, and served the creamy mixture over a mountain of wide egg noodles that soaked up every drop of sauce. The dish filled the kitchen with an aroma that made everyone gather around the stove, asking when dinner would finally be ready. Children loved the way the noodles tangled around their forks, and the sauce coated everything in rich, beefy flavor. Some families stirred in frozen peas for color, others added a splash of Worcestershire sauce for depth, and a few topped each serving with a sprinkle of paprika to make the plate look more sophisticated. The recipe stretched a small amount of meat into a feast, proving that resourcefulness could taste just as good as abundance. Hamburger stroganoff appeared at holiday tables where the main protein was modest, but the love behind it was anything but small. Canned cranberry sauce sliced directly from the can arrived at holiday tables in the 1970s with a distinctive wobble and a perfect cylinder shape that nobody pretended was homemade. Mothers opened the can from the bottom, slid the gelatinous log onto a serving plate, and sliced it into perfect rounds that retained the ridges of the tin. Children poked at the jiggly discs, fascinated by the way the sauce held its shape yet trembled at the slightest touch. The flavor was intensely sweet, almost candy-like, and it paired beautifully with turkey, ham, or whatever main dish the family could afford. Some families arranged the slices in overlapping rows to create a fancier presentation. Others chopped the sauce into chunks and mixed it with fresh orange zest, and a few served it straight from the can without any pretense whatsoever. The canned version cost pennies compared to fresh cranberries, and nobody at the table ever complained about the difference. It was tradition in its purest, most affordable form, a reminder that holiday rituals did not need to be expensive to feel meaningful and deeply loved. Bologna roll-ups with cream cheese were the simple appetizers that made lunch meat feel festive enough for holiday gatherings when fancier options were out of reach. In the 1970s, mothers spread softened cream cheese across slices of bologna, rolled them into tight cylinders, and sliced each roll into bite-sized pinwheels that looked far more elegant than their ingredients suggested. The platters appeared at family parties, church potlucks, and neighborhood gatherings where everyone brought what they could afford and nobody judged what arrived. Children grabbed handfuls before the adults even noticed, loving the salty, creamy combination that tasted like a sandwich without the bread. Some families added a pickle spear in the center before rolling. Others spread mustard beneath the cream cheese for extra tang, and a few secured each roll-up with a festive toothpick topped with colored cellophane. The appetizers required no cooking, no special skills, and almost no money, which made them perfect for busy kitchens stretched thin by the season. Bologna roll-ups proved that celebration did not require caviar or imported cheese, just creativity and the courage to serve something humble with pride. Tuna noodle casserole served as the Christmas Eve dinner in Catholic homes and modest households where fish was supposed to be the tradition, but fresh seafood prices made that completely impossible. In the 1970s, mothers drained cans of tuna, mixed the flaky fish with cooked egg noodles and cream of mushroom soup, and baked everything under a crunchy topping of crushed potato chips or buttered breadcrumbs. The casserole emerged from the oven bubbling and golden, filling the kitchen with an aroma that smelled like comfort and tradition rolled into one satisfying dish. Children ate it without complaint because the sauce was creamy, the noodles were tender, and the crunchy topping made every bite feel special. Some families stirred in frozen peas for color, others added shredded cheese for richness, and a few squeezed lemon juice over the top just before serving. The dish honored the tradition of eating fish on Christmas Eve without requiring the expense of shrimp, salmon, or anything that came fresh from the sea. Tuna casserole was proof that faith and frugality could share the same table beautifully. Homemade Chex Mix served as the party snack that stretched breakfast cereal into something salty, savory, and impossibly addictive at holiday gatherings throughout the 1970s. Mothers mixed together boxes of wheat, rice, and corn Chex with pretzels, mixed nuts, and whatever else the pantry offered, then tossed everything in melted butter seasoned with Worcestershire sauce, garlic powder, and a generous shake of seasoned salt. The mixture baked low and slow in the oven, filling the house with a fragrance that made everyone wander into the kitchen, asking for just one handful before the party started. Children hovered nearby, sneaking pieces from the cooling pans while parents pretended not to notice. The snack appeared in bowls on coffee tables, in bags sent home with guests, and in tins mailed to relatives who lived too far away to visit. Some families added bagel chips, others tossed in cheese crackers, and a few experimented with spicy variations that made mouths tingle. The mix cost almost nothing but tasted like something worth celebrating, proving that the best party food came from creativity rather than expense. Government cheese appeared in kitchens throughout the 1970s, whether families asked for it or not. A dense orange block distributed through food assistance programs that became an unexpected staple of modest holiday cooking. The cheese arrived in plain cardboard boxes, unbranded and utilitarian, but inside was something that melted beautifully and tasted richer than anything the grocery store offered at twice the price. Mothers sliced it for sandwiches, cubed it for casseroles, and grated it over everything from scrambled eggs to baked potatoes. The flavor was sharp, salty, and unmistakably American. The kind of cheese that made grilled cheese sandwiches legendary and macaroni dishes unforgettable. Children grew up believing this was simply what cheese tasted like, never realizing its origins until years later. Some families felt embarrassed by the government label, others embraced it with gratitude and pride, and a few traded blocks with neighbors who preferred different varieties. The cheese filled bellies, stretched budgets, and proved that dignity could be found in accepting help when help was offered. Saltine toffee, sometimes called Christmas crack, was the last-minute candy that transformed humble crackers into something sticky, crunchy, and dangerously addictive during the holiday season. In the 1970s, mothers lined baking sheets with saltine crackers, boiled butter and brown sugar into a bubbling toffee, poured the mixture over the crackers, and baked everything until the kitchen smelled like a candy factory. The trays emerged from the oven golden and glistening, and before the toffee could fully harden, a layer of chocolate chips was scattered across the top to melt into a glossy coating. Children pressed their noses against the oven door, waiting for permission to break off pieces that shattered into sweet, salty shards. Some families sprinkled chopped nuts over the chocolate. Others added a dusting of sea salt, and a few drizzled white chocolate in zigzag patterns for extra flair. The candy required ingredients that most pantries already held, which made it perfect for tight budgets and busy schedules. Saltine toffee proved that elegance and expense did not always have to go hand in hand. Tang punch, mixed with ginger ale, was the space-age drink that made holiday parties feel futuristic and fizzy without costing more than pocket change. In the 1970s, families who could not afford real orange juice discovered that the powdered drink astronauts carried into orbit could become festive when mixed with bubbly soda and served in fancy glasses. Mothers stirred the bright orange powder into pitchers, added chilled ginger ale for sparkle, and watched the mixture fizz into something that looked almost like champagne for children. The flavor was tangy, sweet, and slightly artificial in a way that somehow felt exciting rather than disappointing. Kids lined up for refills, amazed that something from outer space had landed on their holiday table. Some families floated scoops of sherbet in the punch bowl, others added maraschino cherries for color, and a few froze the mixture into popsicles for a festive treat. The drink required almost nothing but powder, soda, and imagination, which made it perfect for gatherings where every penny mattered. Tang Punch proved that celebration did not require expensive ingredients, just the willingness to mix something simple into something that sparkled. Mock champagne for New Year's Eve was the fizzy, festive drink that let children and budget-conscious families toast the new year without spending money on anything alcoholic or expensive. In the 1970s, mothers mixed white grape juice with ginger ale or lemon-lime soda, poured the bubbly combination into fancy glasses, and watched everyone clink and celebrate as if the bottle had come from France. The drink sparkled under the living room lights, the bubbles tickled noses, and nobody felt left out of the midnight toast. Children loved being included in the grown-up ritual, holding their glasses high and counting down alongside parents who smiled at the simple joy of the moment. Some families added a splash of cranberry juice for color. Others dropped in frozen grapes to keep the drink cold, and a few served it in plastic champagne flutes that looked surprisingly elegant. The recipe cost almost nothing but created memories that lasted far longer than any expensive bottle ever could. Mock champagne was proof that celebration belonged to everyone, not just those who could afford the real thing. Depression-era fruitcake with minimal fruit was the dense loaf that appeared at holiday tables when tradition demanded fruitcake, but the budget demanded something more modest. In the 1970s, families who remembered harder times still baked these cakes using recipes passed down from grandmothers who learned to stretch expensive ingredients across multiple holidays. The batter was thick with flour, molasses, and spices, but the candied fruits and nuts that should have studded every slice appeared sparingly, almost as accents rather than main ingredients. Mothers soaked whatever dried fruit they could afford in juice, folded it into the batter, and baked loaves that were more bread than jewel. The cakes were wrapped in cheesecloth, stored in tins, and aged until Christmas, when they emerged dense, dark, and surprisingly satisfying. Children learned to appreciate the spiced sweetness even without the colorful chunks they saw in magazine photos. Some families added extra raisins to fill the gaps. Others stirred in applesauce for moisture, and a few drizzled honey glaze over the top. The fruitcake carried history in every bite, a reminder that traditions survive even when ingredients do not. Wacky cake made without eggs or butter was the chocolate miracle that appeared in kitchens where dairy was too expensive and eggs were saved for more essential meals. In the 1970s, families discovered that a simple combination of flour, sugar, cocoa, vinegar, vanilla, oil, and water could produce a cake so moist and rich that nobody ever guessed what was missing. The recipe had survived from wartime rationing, passed along through handwritten cards and church cookbooks until it became a holiday staple for anyone watching their budget. Mothers mixed the batter directly in the baking pan, creating wells for the wet ingredients and stirring everything together without dirtying extra bowls. The cake rose beautifully, filled the kitchen with chocolate aroma, and emerged from the oven tender enough to impress anyone who tasted it. Children never knew the difference, reaching for second slices with frosting smeared across their faces. Some families dusted the top with powdered sugar, others spread peanut butter frosting for extra richness, and a few layered the cake with whipped cream and strawberries. Wacky cake proved that scarcity could inspire creativity rather than disappointment. Popcorn balls wrapped in wax paper were the homemade treats that turned a cheap bag of kernels into something that felt like a real Christmas gift. In the 1970s, mothers popped massive batches of corn, boiled sugar, and corn syrup into sticky caramel and mixed everything together before shaping the warm mixture into spheres with greased hands. The balls cooled on kitchen counters, hardening into crunchy, sweet orbs that children could barely wait to unwrap. Each one was bundled in wax paper twisted at the top, sometimes tied with ribbon or tagged with handwritten names. The treats appeared in gift bags for neighbors, in lunchboxes for school parties, and on platters at family gatherings where everyone reached for one before dinner started. Some families added food coloring for festive red and green variations, others stirred in peanuts or candy pieces, and a few drizzled melted chocolate over the finished balls for extra indulgence. The recipe cost almost nothing but created something that looked and tasted like celebration. Popcorn balls were proof that the best gifts came from the kitchen, not the store. Potted meat and Vienna sausages in tiny tins found their way into stockings and snack drawers as affordable holiday treats that looked almost whimsical in their compact packaging. The potted meat spread onto crackers like a pâté for people who had never heard the word, salty and dense with a texture that some loved and others tolerated. Vienna sausages slid out of their cans in neat little rows, pale pink and glistening, ready to be eaten straight or tucked into recipes that made do with what was available. Kids saw them as novelty foods, something fun and different from the usual meals, and that perception made the budget stretch easier. Parents appreciated how long the tiny tins lasted in the pantry, never spoiling, always ready when hunger struck without warning. They showed up at picnics, road trips, and late-night snacking sessions, never demanding refrigeration or special treatment. And during the holidays, they became stocking stuffers that actually got eaten instead of tossed aside. The tins were cheap, the contents were filling, and the memories they created lasted far longer than anyone expected. Instant mashed potatoes were the unsung hero of the 1970s working-class dinner table. Just add water, stir, and you had a bowl of creamy white comfort. No peeling, no mashing, no waste, just convenience you could rely on when time, money, and energy ran thin. They were not perfect, but they filled the plate beside ham or Spam and soaked up every bit of instant gravy like they were made for each other. When poured from the box, the flakes looked like nothing. But the moment hot water hit, they bloomed into something that felt like plenty. Mothers stirred slowly, fluffing them with care, turning thrift into comfort with every spoonful. The smell of salt and butter filled the house, blending with laughter and the sound of clinking plates. Instant potatoes were proof that love didn't need to come from scratch, it only needed to be warm. The flakes came in simple boxes, but the satisfaction they brought was real. Children loved them for their smoothness. Parents loved them for their speed. When Christmas dinner needed stretching, instant potatoes were the answer. It was the kind of meal that said, "We made do, but we still celebrated." For families counting every penny, those pale, powdery spuds were a small piece of holiday peace. Orbitz drink looked like a science experiment, and honestly, it kind of was. The glass bottles were filled with colorful liquid and tiny gelatin beads that floated mid-air like some kind of edible lava lamp. It was marketed as a drink from the future, combining 1990s aesthetics with 1980s optimism. The problem was, no one knew what it actually was, or if it was safe. The suspended beads were made from gelatin gum, an unapproved additive at the time. Regulators later found the formula didn't meet food safety standards, citing issues with consistency, stability, and digestion. Consumers were equally confused, half fascinated, half disgusted. The drink's texture was bizarre, thick yet watery, with chewy bits that made every sip a dare. People bought it once for the novelty, took a sip, and left the rest on the shelf. Within a year, the futuristic beverage was banned from most markets and quietly discontinued. Today, surviving bottles sell for hundreds of dollars online, still sealed, not because anyone wants to drink them, but because they look like relics from an alternate reality where taste didn't matter. Orbitz was what happens when marketing dreams too big and science says, absolutely not. Leave it to the 1950s to find a way to combine infants and industrial design. The glass baby bottle with a metal nipple was marketed as the hygienic choice for modern mothers. It promised durability, style, and the reassuring shine of polished chrome. In practice, it was a dentist's nightmare waiting to happen. Babies were encouraged to suckle from small metal spouts that turned freezing cold in winter and scorching hot in summer. The bottles themselves were heavy, slippery, and prone to shattering at the slightest drop. So basically, perfect for small, uncoordinated hands. Yet the ads were stunning. Rosy-cheeked babies drinking happily while mothers beamed at the future of feeding. Hospitals even endorsed them, believing glass and metal meant cleanliness. Plastic was considered cheap, rubber unsanitary. No one mentioned burns or lacerations. It was the golden age of over-engineering, where even baby care had to look like a rocket launch. Parents wanted sleek, scientific solutions to everything, even if they made no sense. By the end of the decade, common sense won. Soft silicone nipples replaced steel, and bottles became lighter and safer. But for a time, feeding your child looked like refueling a car. Clunky, dangerous, and somehow deeply optimistic. Green Giant canned peas made vegetables exciting, or at least as exciting as canned peas could get. With the booming grocery industry of the 1950s, canned goods were the heart of every pantry, and Green Giant led the pack. The jolly Green Giant himself, towering and cheerful, became one of the most recognizable mascots in America. His booming "ho, ho, ho" turned something as humble as peas into a promise of health and happiness. Canned peas were soft, mild, and a little salty, but they represented something much bigger, the belief that science and packaging could make nature last forever. Housewives felt proud serving them, confident they were feeding their families well, even in the middle of winter. Kids might have pushed them around their plates, but for parents, they were modern miracles in tin form. Vegetables were no longer something that spoiled. They were always available, fresh in theory if not in texture. Green Giant made it easy to feel good about dinner, to believe that the future of food was safe, simple, and smiling from a label. Government cheese in the orange box was one of the most recognizable symbols of stretching through hard times, a dense golden block that arrived through commodity programs and sat heavily in the hands of whoever carried it home. The cheese itself was rich, creamy, and melted into everything with an almost aggressive smoothness that store-bought cheese could never match. Families sliced it for sandwiches, cubed it for snacking, and grated it over casseroles that stretched ground beef into meals for six. There was no pretending about where it came from, and kids often saw the orange box sitting on the counter before it was quickly tucked away. Some families felt embarrassed picking it up, standing in lines at distribution centers while hoping no neighbors drove by. But once the cheese hit the pan, sizzling into grilled sandwiches or bubbling over macaroni, the shame dissolved into something closer to gratitude. It tasted better than it had any right to, and many adults still chase that particular flavor without realizing where the memory began. Government cheese fed families when paychecks fell short, and it did so without apology. Canned ham was the Christmas centerpiece for countless working-class families in the 1970s. You did not need a butcher, just a tin opener and a bit of hope. It came packed in thick jelly, glistening with salt and promise. When it hit the oven, the sound of sizzling fat filled the air, and the sugary glaze turned it into something far grander than it was. Families gathered around the table, knives scraping plates, pretending it was a proper holiday roast. The laughter that followed every bite was the real luxury, proof that joy could come from even the humblest meal. The tin might have been cheap, but the memory it made was priceless. Housewives baked it with a smear of brown sugar or a few pineapple rings to make it feel festive, even if it came from the discount aisle. The smell of it cooking filled the kitchen with a sweetness that tried its best to imitate a proper roast. It was the affordable way to have meat for Christmas, when real hams were far out of reach. Families sliced it thin, served it beside instant potatoes, and pretended it was glazed by choice, not necessity. Yet somehow, it always did the job. Even on tight budgets, canned ham made the table look full and the day feel special. It was thrift dressed up as tradition, and no one needed to know the difference. Tartar control potato chips sounded like a joke, and honestly, it probably should have stayed one. In an era obsessed with innovation, some marketing genius decided that vinegar-flavored chips should taste more cleansing. So they launched Tartar control chips, seasoned with acidic compounds meant to mimic the tang of tartar sauce. They hit the shelves in select stores in the mid-1980s and were gone almost immediately. Customers hated them. The flavor was a sour, greasy mess that coated your mouth in salt and regret. Health experts didn't love them either, since the acidic oils were harsh on enamel and stomach lining. Even the name was off-putting. No one wants dental hygiene in their snack aisle. By the time complaints reached the FDA, the brand had already started pulling inventory. Some blamed a bad batch, others blamed bad judgment. But either way, the clean chip experiment ended in disgrace. Years later, collectors still talk about the packaging, a smiling tooth holding a bag of chips, blissfully unaware of its fate. Tartar control chips became the ultimate punchline in the 1980s snack lore, proof that not every new idea deserves to make it past the brainstorming stage. Few foods say future and fear quite like the 1950s potted meat luncheon loaf, an edible contradiction trapped in translucent gelatin. Billed as the modern meal, it promised protein, convenience, and elegance, all packed neatly into a shimmering cube. Housewives opened the can with a satisfying hiss, only to reveal a pinkish slab wobbling like something from another planet. The gelatin was meant to seal in freshness, though it mostly sealed in terror. Still, the advertisements were stunning. Smiling families slicing perfect meat squares garnished with pineapple rings and lettuce. It looked clean, futuristic, like something astronauts might eat at a dinner party on Mars. And for a country obsessed with modernity, that was enough. No one wanted to cook anymore, not when canned chemistry could do the job faster. The taste? Imagine Bologna with stage fright. It slid, it quivered, it haunted you. But to 1950s consumers, the gelatin loaf was proof humanity had conquered food itself. It wasn't just a meal, it was a message. The kitchen of tomorrow had arrived, and it came with preservatives. For better or worse, the gelatin craze turned ordinary meals into edible science experiments, each one wobbling proudly under fluorescent light. Over time, these meat miracles disappeared from shelves, victims of changing tastes and better judgment. But their legacy lives on in every molded salad and canned mystery meat that dares call itself gourmet. Sanka coffee was the quiet companion of early mornings and late-night talks, a small orange can that promised the pleasure of coffee without the jitters. Before the 1950s, decaf was a curiosity. After Sanka, it became a movement. For health-conscious adults, it offered a way to keep the ritual while easing the nerves. The name itself, short for sans caffeine, felt sophisticated, like a European secret that had finally arrived in American kitchens. It gave people permission to drink coffee anytime, day or night, and still sleep soundly. Its mild, smooth flavor was comforting, especially for the older generation who still wanted to sip alongside younger caffeine drinkers. Advertisements called it the coffee that lets you rest, and that sentiment fit perfectly into an era that valued calm and composure. Sanka represented refinement, restraint, and balance at a time when indulgence was often followed by guilt. It was coffee made civilized, offering a sense of self-care long before that phrase existed. For millions of Americans, one orange cup at a time, Sanka was proof that moderation could still taste wonderful. Canned vegetables for holiday side dishes lined the pantry shelves in rows of green, yellow, and pale white, their labels promising convenience and a price that fit the tightest budget. Green beans sat in water that tasted faintly metallic. Corn kernels floated in cloudy brine, and peas rolled out of the can with a softness that fresh produce could never replicate. Families heated them on the stove with a pat of margarine, a shake of salt, and the hope that presentation would carry them through dinner. Nobody mentioned that the neighbors might be serving fresh vegetables or something frozen that still held a crunch. Canned sides were dependable, affordable, and fast, which mattered more during busy holiday seasons than anyone cared to admit. Kids pushed them around their plates, bargaining for dessert and promising to eat every last bite. Parents scooped them into serving bowls that once belonged to grandmothers, treating the contents with the same care as anything homemade. And at the end of the meal, those bowls were often empty, picked clean by people who were simply grateful to have food on the table at all. Canned pineapple rings were the 1970s version of edible decoration, cheap, colorful, and capable of making any meal feel a little more exotic. Housewives loved how they instantly dressed up a plain canned ham or a boxed cake mix, turning something simple into something festive. The pineapple came in syrup so sweet it could double as glaze, and the smell alone felt like a special occasion. Even the act of opening the can felt like unveiling treasure, the golden slices stacked neatly in their sugary pool. Sometimes a family could only afford one tin, but it was enough to make the whole table shine. Children loved spearing them with toothpicks or stealing the cherries that sat in their centers. A single ring of pineapple could turn a regular meal into something that felt like Christmas dinner. You could stick a cherry in the center, and suddenly it looked like a holiday feast straight from a magazine. It was the illusion of luxury, sold for pennies, and that was part of its charm. Pineapple rings symbolized optimism. They brought brightness to gray kitchens, a splash of sunshine to cold December tables. They reminded families that celebration did not require money, just imagination. Even now, the sight of those golden rings takes people back to a time when small joys were enough to make Christmas feel whole. The artificial whipped cream in pressurized glass cans was a disaster waiting to happen. And in the 1980s, it finally did. Long before aluminum cans became standard, some whipped cream brands packaged their product in sleek, clear glass bottles to show off the rich texture inside. They looked beautiful in commercials, frosty, elegant, and perfectly premium. But behind that gloss was a bomb. The pressurized nitrous oxide used to propel the cream reacted unpredictably with the glass, especially when stored in cold grocery freezers. Several cans shattered or outright exploded, sending shards and whipped cream flying. Supermarkets reported injuries, lawsuits followed, and regulators stepped in immediately. The product was recalled nationwide within months, replaced by safer aluminum designs. Some brands tried to blame improper storage, but consumers weren't buying it, literally or figuratively. The incident reshaped how aerosol products were tested and handled in the food industry. For a while, though, it was pure chaos. Aisles covered in cream, warning signs posted in freezer sections, and one more lesson learned about how form should never beat function. The glass cans disappeared forever, but their story lives on as one of the strangest explosions in grocery history. Cracker Jack was more than a snack. It was a little piece of American magic tucked inside every box. Sweet caramel-coated popcorn and peanuts tumbled together in that familiar red and white striped package, and at the bottom waited a prize that made every handful an adventure. Kids tore into the bags, not just for the taste, but for the tiny surprise buried within: a sticker, a ring, a trinket worth its weight in excitement. In a world without digital screens or fast distractions, that little prize felt like treasure. The sound of the box shaking was the sound of pure anticipation, a simple thrill that never grew old. Even adults could not resist the nostalgia of it, remembering afternoons at ball games or movie matinees where Cracker Jack was the treat of choice. The caramel stuck to your fingers and the sweetness lingered long after the last peanut was gone. Its sailor mascot smiled from every box, a symbol of simpler times and innocent pleasures. It was not fancy, but it was full of heart, a snack that reminded everyone that joy could come from the smallest things. In the 1950s grocery aisle, Cracker Jack stood proudly as a reminder that life's sweetest moments often came wrapped in something humble, crunchy, and just a little sticky. Imitation vanilla extract sat on spice racks in small brown bottles that looked almost identical to the real thing, fooling no one who knew the difference but saving dollars that mattered more than flavor. The liquid inside smelled sweeter, sharper, and somehow less warm than pure vanilla, but it disappeared into cookie dough and cake batter without anyone at the table ever noticing. Mothers who baked through the holidays used it generously, knowing that the cookies would still vanish and the cakes would still earn compliments regardless of what the bottle actually contained. Real vanilla was expensive, a luxury reserved for people who did not have to check prices before dropping something into the cart. Imitation vanilla was the quiet compromise, the ingredient that let holiday traditions continue without breaking the budget. Kids licked spoons coated in batter and never questioned the source of the sweetness. The cookies came out golden, the frosting tasted rich, and the memories formed around kitchen tables where the smell of baking filled every room. Nobody cared whether the vanilla was real as long as the love behind it was unmistakable. Canned sweet potatoes were the base of countless 1970s Christmas casseroles, soft and syrupy right out of the tin. Housewives drained the thick liquid, mashed them with a little margarine and sugar, then topped them with marshmallows or pecans if the budget allowed. The result was sweet, heavy, and comforting, the taste of home when the cupboards were half empty. It was one of those foods that reminded people that holidays were not about luxury, but about making do with what you had. The orange mash looked bright and joyful on the plate, a flash of color in otherwise simple meals. It was spooned out with pride, even when everyone knew it came from a can. The sugary glaze thickened as it cooled, turning leftovers into dessert by morning. For a few days each year, that casserole dish was the heart of the table, a symbol of sweetness in lean times. Even from a can, sweet potatoes carried warmth and heart. The orange glow in the casserole dish was as much a decoration as it was a meal. Families did not need a fancy roast to feel festive, they just needed this. Pre-packaged tuna salad kits with mayonnaise packets were a lunchtime revolution gone wrong. Designed for workers and students on the go, they came with everything you needed: crackers, tuna, and a tiny pouch of mayonnaise. All you had to do was mix and eat. Simple, right? Until stores started noticing the kits spoiling on shelves. The heat-sensitive mayonnaise packets were breaking down in transit, creating a bacterial playground inside the package. Even sealed, the kits were quietly festering, the tuna sweating, the mayo curdling. Some customers opened theirs to find greenish residue or an unmistakable sour smell. It wasn't just unappetizing, it was unsafe. Reports of food poisoning began surfacing, and grocery chains pulled them overnight. Consumers felt betrayed. A product marketed as safe and convenient had turned risky and rancid. By the early 1990s, new packaging laws banned unrefrigerated mayo kits entirely. Tuna lunch kits later returned with shelf-stable formulas, but the trust was gone. The original kits are remembered as the lunchbox equivalent of a ticking time bomb, one that exploded not with sound, but with stomach aches. Chef Boyardee spaghetti and meatballs brought Italian food to the American dinner table, canned, convenient, and ready in minutes. To families who had never seen real pasta before, it was exotic and exciting. The red sauce, the soft noodles, and the tiny meatballs were a revelation for suburban kitchens. It was a product of the immigrant dream made accessible to everyone. Opening that can was like opening the door to another culture, safe, sweet, and just foreign enough to feel adventurous. It was comfort food with a passport, wrapped in a label that felt both friendly and daring. Chef Boyardee himself became a household name, a smiling symbol of culinary adventure you could trust. It was a way to feel worldly without leaving your kitchen, and that felt like progress. The canned pasta might not have been authentic, but it was comforting, consistent, and distinctly American. It made weeknight dinners easier and mealtime a little more exciting. For a generation raised on casseroles and meatloaf, it was a taste of something new, safe, simple, and satisfying. Chef Boyardee proved that food could be both foreign and familiar, opening the door for a nation ready to eat its way into modernity. Canned ham with the key opener was the centerpiece of countless holiday tables in the 1980s, glistening under kitchen lights as if it had earned its place at the head of the spread. The metal key attached to the side was almost ceremonial, twisted slowly until the lid curled away and revealed the pink dome of pressed meat inside. It smelled faintly of salt and something vaguely smoky, and it sliced cleanly into rounds that looked almost elegant when fanned across a platter. Families who could not afford a fresh roast or a honey-glazed spiral found dignity in this tin-encased alternative, dressing it up with pineapple rings, maraschino cherries, and a sticky brown sugar glaze. Children watched the slicing with fascination, unaware that the ham represented careful budgeting and weeks of saving. It fed a crowd without emptying a wallet, and leftovers lasted well into the new year. The canned ham never tried to be something it was not, and families embraced it without shame. It was protein, it was tradition, and it was enough. And when the last slice was gone, the empty tin often found a second life holding buttons, screws, or childhood treasures. Stovetop stuffing was the decade's great kitchen shortcut. 10 minutes from packet to pan, and suddenly the room smelled like Christmas. The mixture of breadcrumbs and herbs came ready to mix, no stale bread required. Housewives poured boiling water over it, fluffed it with a fork, and pretended it had roasted in the oven all morning. The truth did not matter. The illusion was everything. As soon as the sage and onion scent hit the air, it wrapped the room in warmth. Families gathered near the stove, lured by that rich, savory smell that promised comfort. It was a kind of culinary magic. Ordinary water transformed into holiday spirit. Each bite carried the illusion of abundance, and that illusion was enough to make people smile. It brought that unmistakable aroma of sage, onion, and nostalgia that made families feel rich for an evening. When you served it beside canned meat and instant potatoes, it transformed the ordinary into something close to a feast. People might have laughed at how fake it was, but they still went back for seconds. It tasted like warmth, like memory, like home. Proof that comfort could come from a box. Blue Pepsi in the 1980s was an experiment that looked like the future, until the future banned it. It was Pepsi's first foray into color innovation, a glowing cobalt drink that turned heads on store shelves. The blue hue was mesmerizing, electric, and unapologetically artificial, giving the soda an almost science fiction vibe. But the secret behind that brilliant color was less exciting. Chemical dyes, later deemed unsafe for human consumption. The dyes used, like Blue Number. One and a few experimental additives were linked to toxicity concerns after being tested in animals. Some reports even hinted at allergic reactions in sensitive drinkers. For a while, Pepsi brushed it off, calling it color evolution. The FDA called it something else, a violation. Stores pulled it from shelves quietly, and Pepsi moved on to safer formulations. Still, for anyone who tasted it, Blue Pepsi was unforgettable. Syrupy, neon, and strangely metallic, like drinking an electric wire. It was the 1980s bottled, loud, bold, and completely unbothered by health warnings until it was too late. The idea would later resurface decades later in the 1990s with Pepsi Blue, but that version was a sanitized echo of the original. The first Blue Pepsi remains a bright, toxic symbol of a decade that never met a bad idea it couldn't package and sell. The 1950s were an era of bizarre inventions, but few were as hauntingly memorable as the mechanical ice cream cone licker. Marketed as a fun training toy, it featured a fake cone topped with a spinning rubber tongue that rotated rapidly when turned on. Children were supposed to hold it up and practice licking without wasting real ice cream. The result? A generation of traumatized kids and confused parents. The ads called it educational, teaching hand-eye coordination through dessert simulation. But the reality looked more like a carnival nightmare. The rubber tongue made unsettling slurping noises, often flicking droplets of melted ice cream substitute across the room. Sometimes it jammed mid-lick, leaving the toy whirring angrily while kids screamed. It was the perfect symbol of the decade's faith in machines, proof that even pleasure could be automated, and humanity would be better for it. Parents bought it anyway, because the 1950s were the golden age of gimmicks, when no one wanted to be left behind by progress, no matter how creepy it looked. The mechanical licker was soon discontinued, likely after realizing that children didn't need help eating ice cream. They were already experts. But for a brief, bizarre moment, the future had a face, and it was a spinning rubber tongue. Ritz crackers were the golden ticket to effortless sophistication. Buttery, crisp, and perfectly round, they turned simple snacks into something special. A box of Ritz was always present at bridge clubs, holiday parties, and quiet family nights alike. It was the kind of food that made you feel fancy, even when topped with nothing more than cheese or peanut butter. The slogan, "Everything tastes better when it sits on a Ritz," captured the essence of post-war optimism, an idea that even the ordinary could be elevated with a little style. They were indulgence within reach, luxury you could hold between your fingers. In the 1950s, Ritz crackers weren't just snacks, they were social glue. They made entertaining easy, elegant, and endlessly repeatable. You could build tiny appetizers or crush them into casseroles. They did it all. Ritz gave families the feeling that refinement didn't need to be expensive, just buttery and well-packaged. It was the taste of class, one golden bite at a time. If any of these forgotten foods stirred a memory from your childhood table, share your story in the comments below, tap like to keep this nostalgia alive, and subscribe so you never miss another trip back to the kitchens that made do with love.